I watched the movie Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. This movie depicts a young boy on the autism spectrum. The movie is based on a book that does not label the boy as autistic, but in the movie he is portrayed as having autism spectrum disorder. I will note that there was a line when the boy, Oscar, said that he was tested for Asperger's and that the tests were inconclusive. The movie tells the story of this boy coping with the death of his father on 9/11 in the World Trade Centers. He is searching for a lock to match a key he found in his father's things. He obsessively goes to every person with the last name Black in New York City. He speaks to each one to see if they knew his father. Some of Oscar's characteristics that I noticed while watching the movie were experiencing sensory overload, being blunt in conversation, fear of many things, obsessiveness, self-isolation, self-harm, intense emotions, and violence. Autism, as defined by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, refers to a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally evident before age 3, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Other characteristics often associated with autism are engaging in repetitive activities and stereotype movements, resistance to environmental change or change in daily routines, and unusual responses to sensory experiences.
Jesus is worse than looking at a brick wall. And I feel like I'm looking at a brick wall because I tried the key in 148 different places, but the key didn't fit. And open anything that has in it, which Dad needed me to find so that I know without him everything is going to be all right.
I think this movie did a pretty good job representing autism spectrum disorder. It is an interesting thing to determine, however, because there is such a spectrum. Some of the characteristics portrayed definitely seemed like a more severe form of autism spectrum disorder, while others seemed more mild. Oscar experienced very intense sensory overload and carried a tambourine to calm him in scary situations. He had an intense fear of many things: swings, elevators, public transit, bridges, etc. He was somewhat awkward in social situations, but was portrayed as a charming child who could hold interesting conversations with adults. I think that people with autism spectrum disorder who watch this film may see it as an overly dramatic representation of autism and may believe that these overdramatic representations may elicit pity. But it also shows Oscar as a loving child who has many people who love him just as he is. There is also a stereotype about people with autism that they don't have any emotion or cannot feel or show love. This movie does not represent that. Oscar loves his father deeply, has strong feelings, and is loved for who he is by both of his parents. He has trouble connecting with his mother throughout the film, but in the end, they understand each other better and are much more open. I think that people without disabilities may see people with autism as a stereotype of a socially awkward and very smart person. While it is true that many people with autism have high IQs, that is not always the case. In fact, 31% of children with autism have an intellectual disability. In popular culture, people with autism are usually portrayed as having a high IQ, so many people may think that's always the case. This movie could perpetuate that stereotype. Oscar was portrayed a little bit like a superhero in the end of the movie. He overcame some difficult parts of his disability, and he and his caregivers were happier because of it. I believe it was a bit of a construction to show the general public courage as defined in the block reading. It also seemed that overcoming parts of his disability was a problem of personal acceptance, as talked about in the Longmore reading. This was a really great learning experience for me. I knew almost nothing about autism going into this. There is a student in my internship classroom who is on the autism spectrum, and it was really great to do some more research into the disorder and to compare the student to Oscar in the film. It is also important to remember to look critically at representations in film and media, so I do not fall into believing that people are the same as their stereotypes.